Icona might be able to, would have to say, well, wait a minute. If someone accuses me of contradiction, error in my book, well, first of all, I'll admit I'm imperfect. This speaks to the issue of where he's coming from when it comes to the issue of inspiration. Because, look, by the way, if he were just to come out and say, look, okay, I don't believe in the classic doctrine of inspiration. I think it's untenable. I think inspiration is primarily limited to concepts. I still think the Bible is authoritative, but it is authoritative only in what it communicates as far as general concepts, not in regards to its specific words. If he'd just come out and say that, that would put him smack dab in the middle of the majority of mainstream Christian scholarship, which also produces no apologetics because it doesn't have any reason to. That's where I think a lot of people are sensing such a tension here. Is why bother doing apologetics? Because that perspective, which is got lots of people in it, it really does. I'm not there. I'll never be there by God's grace. But there's lots of people there. And he'd have lots of places he could teach. I mean, he's teaching at a place where I bet you that's the mainstream perspective. Just come out and say it. I think historical, the Chicago Statement of Inerrancy, untenable, put aside. I think that inspiration is of concepts, not of words, and therefore Mark could be confused, John 6:45, and I don't mind if there's tensions in Mark. In other words, I don't mind interpreting the Bible to where Mark's contradictory to Mark, or Mark can write, can go 3 or 4 sentences down the road and create a contradiction. I don't have any problem with that. That's the majority view today. And, the Muslims just, they love that stuff. They would never accept that on their side, but, they're inconsistent. So, we won't worry about that. He would be amongst many, many, many others. What's strange is that group of people doesn't produce much in the way of apologetics, though. Because once you start down that road, it's not like you really have an objective revelation any longer to really ground things on. And you've seen what happens when people collapse on this. One word, one name, David Gushee. Happens all the time. We see it happening. I just think, just be open about it. Just say, this is where I am. I have come to the conclusion that because inerrancy has a meaning. And if you don't believe it, then just tell the world, I don't believe it. Explain why. Explain what you do believe positively and move on. I think that's what needs to be done. So what's happened is, so my assertion was, if you interpret Mark in such a way as to make Mark contradict himself in the same chapter, I haven't counted the number of words, but it's just a matter of words later on. All he does is he tells the story of the walking in the water and then continues right on, and it just seems really strained to try to read an issue here. That's why I said initially last week? Yeah, last week. That's why I initially said, issues about directional use of prepositions just doesn't seem to be where you'd want to go to actually try to prove an error in Scripture. Well, he then, and I think it was Adam Blauser put up an article today that if you don't read in his area, it's difficult to follow at the beginning, to be perfectly honest with you. Way too much technical vocabulary in it, but he sees a lot of the same things that I see. And what he sees is what you very often get, and this is what you got in Dr. Lycona's addition to his article in response to me. Well, let's look at the percentage of uses in Mark. Well, here's the problem. Every use has a specific context and a specific meaning that the author intended to communicate, or that the author didn't intend to communicate. And so putting percentages together is irrelevant, because we all know there are places where a construction is used. It can only mean one thing, and yet it goes against the percentages of the same author in other areas. I don't know why, but it's really getting toasty in here. It's like the AC's turned off or something. I don't know, but it's getting toasty in here. So the overriding issue, there's two overriding issues. One is the internal issue. How do you explain, starting with the assumption of Mark's own confusion? How do you explain that? What's the mindset that would actually lead, especially a Christian apologist, especially a person whose primary scholarly work up to now has been on the resurrection of Jesus? This is one of the most, we're talking about the Gospels here. There are prophecies of the resurrection in Mark. If Mark was confused about this, then obviously you raise the question, what else was he confused about? If Mark could contradict himself within the context of just a few verses, why couldn't he contradict himself in a wider way? There's all sorts of stuff you can bring up here. Why would you default to this? And this is where I haven't seen any real meaningful response or interaction at this point. And that is, this is an issue of, all right, there is a perfectly adequate way of reading Mark and following the not guilty until proven so, innocent until proven guilty, which is what he would ask us to do with his work. But you don't do that. And that's why I point out to the Muslims who are just can't wait to throw this at somebody at a debate. Don't bother with me, because I'm going to throw it right back at you. Because, again, this is the thing that just bugs me so much about the Muslims who will grab hold of this and run with it, is they already know how often they, on the other side, demand that we read the Quran with far more generosity than they're willing to allow Lycona to read the New Testament. And by the way, I should mention, there is a fundamental difference in the character of the New Testament from the Quran at this point. I mean, you don't have multiple authors in the Quran. You don't have the kind of historical grounding of the Quran. I mean, how many times